Good morning. I hope you're having a fantastic day. So, today I will talk to you about the single most pathetic book released in human history. The single most pathetic book released in human history. And you might ask the question, why would you be so mean? Why would you say such a thing? Well, I have very good evidence for this one, okay? I have very good evidence for this one. So Handbook for Mortals was released, I think like just a couple years ago, and the author is Lani Sarum. Lani Sarum essentially looks like this, but more realistic, okay? Let's put it that way, more realistic. Essentially, this book was a con. It is not written with any competency, number one. Number two, everything about this book is a mess. Number three, she essentially tried to scam her way into the New York Times bestseller list by buying a ton of her book, Handbook for Mortals. And she successfully did that. And she got caught by the public and then she got cancelled. And that was it. She had a brief career in publishing books. It started by trying to scam people. She successfully scammed people, but she got caught and boom. Now, suddenly, she is cancelled. Now, why did she write this book, you might ask a question. That's because that's a very good question. The primary reason she wrote this book, to put it simply, was so that she can get this book adapted into a movie because it's a New York Times bestseller list. Now, the way it goes is, Lani Sarum has an ambition, right? She has an ambition to become essentially an actor. And she wanted to start as this particular protagonist. As you can see here, essentially this is what Lani Sarum looks like. Just, more realistic, yeah? And so in that regard, she wanted this book to become a bestseller list, and she was going to do whatever it took to get to make that happen. She had no talent to write a book. The entire book was an attempt to get it adapted so that she can start as the actress and build her career doing this very bizarre, weird strategy. I mean, if you really want to be an actor, I suppose just, become an actor through established means rather than this very, very odd way of, going through the New York Times bestseller list. Because let me tell you the reality, becoming a New York Times bestseller list is so oversaturated, is so overdone these days. Essentially, every author is a New York Times bestseller list. Number two, every book nowadays is just a New York Times bestseller list. Number three, to actually get a book adapted, you need millions of copies, not few 10,000 copies to get into the New York Times seller list. You need several million copies. You need to be a national or international sensation. So the idea that she could have gotten this book published in any way whatsoever by having it become a New York Times bestseller list was pathetic. And that is why I think this book is the most pathetic book released in human history. Now, let's get to the actual discussion of this chapter, which is how to not write a chapter one. In fact, how to not write a book. This is the book, okay? How to not write a book, Handbook for Mortals. Please don't do it, okay? But if you want to know how to not write a chapter one, you are going to have to really want to buy this book and read it and really pay good attention to the failures and the shortcomings in every paragraph and in every sentence. Chapter 0. Okay, just call it a prologue. God. The Fool. She writes, I've always envied those with normal lives. First of all, there's nothing really wrong with this opening line. Just keep reading and you'll quickly realize how the prose falls apart. I don't think I've ever even had a normal month, a plain week, or an average day. Blah, 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 blah. This entire paragraph does terrible job in introducing any level or any form of conflict. In the first paragraph, what you want to do as the writer is you are going to want to establish, okay, and I'm not joking, you are going to have to establish what is the conflict. You are going to have to at least hint at the conflict. And as you can see here, there is nothing established about the story. The story follows this girl, and she will essentially go in an attempt to, become a better magician. She'll leave her, essentially her home and go into the main lights so that she can actually become a magician. That is the premise here. As you can see here, this is Zaid Holder, has always been a free-spirited young woman from a long dynasty of, tarot card readers, fortune tellers, and practitioners of magic. Grown up in a small town and never, quite fitting in, Zaid is determined to forge her own path. She leaves her home in Tennessee to break free from her overprotective mother. Okay? And so, whereas books that do something like this, for example, Looking for Alaska, they essentially get to the business from the get-go in the first paragraph. This book is technically the definition of, I am going to sit here and I'm going to be sitting here for the next month. It doesn't really do anything. You would think she will get to it in here. I personally believe some things in life are chosen by destiny and some things are your choice. What in the world does this have to do with this story? My advice? She's trying to advise me. What the... It goes on. People say memories will stick with you forever. They burn brightly in your mind, and each detail is as clear as the day it happened. Each color, blah, 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 blah. This paragraph is the first thing, the first moment that hints at a progression of the plot or the story. And it gets your hopes high. Okay, it reads, for me, I will never forget one particular July morning, the gray clouds that hovered over the ancient trees lining the street, the wind that blew swiftly through my blonde hair. It also spun about the chunky pieces of the lower half of my long hair. This is inefficient writing, first of all, but, once you really get to my perfectly cut bangs, she's still about her hair, this is very sad. The smell of rain was strong. Okay, most writers can achieve all of this in 2 or 3 sentences, but she's still about her hair and the smell and how such a July morning it was. I've always loved... Oh my God! You see, I told you, right? This paragraph gets your hopes high. I will never forget. It indicates, a very important event. But this paragraph, first of all, meanders. It's inefficient. It's terrible writing. But then it comes here, and she latches onto this irrelevant nonsense, talking about, most people prefer, talking about thunderstorms. Most people prefer sunny days and puffy white clouds. But not me. I'm not like other girls. I hope for thunder so loud it makes the ground shake, and lightning so bright it illuminates the whole sky. This is what I'm talking about. This whole paragraph does not need to exist, number 1. Okay? Number 2, this entire chunk of story, all the way to here, also does not need to exist. This is what you call editing. As the writer, you have to take a hammer and just chop and chop and chop and chop until you have something resembling a story. This paragraph, most of it needs to be cleaned up. So you see how we have already gotten rid of so much of chapter 1. You would think the problem stops, but no, the problems continue. I had to stop in chapter 3 because I just ran away. I couldn't. I didn't want to suffer, man. Why in the world would I read this when I can read the 3rd book in the Wheel of Time? Or, Terry Pratchett's Discworld. I'm not crazy, okay? I'm not clever, but I'm not crazy either. I've always loved it. Yeah, so you get rid of this paragraph as well. I had lived in that one-horse southern town my whole life. Sure, if you salvage this, if you get rid of this paragraph, okay, and then you get rid of everything above this paragraph, you suddenly restore a lot of word count. So I suppose you could meander in here, but I would never advise meandering. It's just that there is so much meandering here I am having to reconcile. I'm like, woof, I'm removing too much. My family has owned land in this place since the early 1970s, and my ancestors basically established the little town called Centertown, Tennessee. Sure. It's about an hour or so outside Nashville. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. Please. My mother is the area tarot card reader and spellcaster. Finally, another character is introduced. After more than 1,000 words of nonsense, another character is finally introduced. And this character happens to be very crucial because if you remember, her mother, is overprotective. Della, okay? The local resident spellcaster and fortune teller. So her mother happens to be very important for the story. And so a competent writer might in fact begin the story with a scene rather than talking about thunderstorms and trying to give advices and nonsense. They might start the story with, in fact, you might be that competent, writer, and you might start the story trying to write a scene where maybe the protagonist Zaid is trying to do something dangerous, okay, or something that could result in her harm, right? But it's mostly safe environment, and her mother is overprotective, and she lashes out. And you can sprinkle in magic to hook the audience. For example, if you look at Harry Potter, I just found a perfect example, The first scene after the prologue, okay, is with Harry and how the Dursleys are very abusive. And we get to see them being abusive literally from the get-go. That's what you call efficient writing. If J.K. Rowling is anything, she is an efficient writer, okay? Not necessarily exceptional, but she's an efficient writer. She knows how to edit stories so she doesn't waste people's time with nonsense. And so this is very crucial to understand here. And that is why this entire book is terrible. Because this entire book is essentially Lani Sarum putting herself in this girl because she exactly looks like this girl, And further from that point, the book is so terribly written, it does not have any efficient writing. It does not have any focused writing. Number 3, when you are writing stories, what you want to do is you want to determine your objective. For example, right now, when I was critiquing and coming up with a scene here for the mother, I determined the objective. What is the objective? Let's demonstrate the mother's overprotectiveness, which later might inspire the girl to, become a rebel and just run away. That is the objective that you have identified. Then you try to execute the objective. There is no objective in here. There is no understanding of objectives in here, so much so that you can sniff it in every paragraph. I mean, look at this. She talks about thunderstorms here, right? And she immediately latches onto that. And she starts talking about thunderstorms. What does that have to do with the story? Nonsense. You have to write scenes to execute your objectives. This paragraph is entire waste. This entire book is a waste. It was a clear self-assassination. This whole book was self-assassination from Lani Sarum. It should not exist. Anyway, this whole thing continues, This whole thing continues, and it doesn't really stop. You would think it stops, man. It doesn't. The book is so terribly slow. The book is so inefficient, it hurts the mind. So, I recommend you buy this book, and I recommend you read it, and heck, wait a minute, you can actually just pirate it if you don't want to waste your money on such nonsense. But I think it's worth the purchase. I think it's worth the purchase because holding this book in your own hands, reading through it, it becomes a whole experience, So I hope that, you enjoyed this video, and that is going to be how to not write a chapter 1, okay? This is the most pathetic book in history. Number 2, this book is one of the worst written books in human history. It's just so awful. So I hope that you enjoyed this. Please consider subscribing if you did. Have a nice day. Bye.